Let me Google that.
This podcast is brought to you by Anchor. You know why? Because Anchor makes it ridiculously easy to make a podcast. Either in the app or through the online dashboard, you get everything you need to record, edit, distribute, and monetize your podcast, and it's free. As a creator, I also appreciate that Anchor lets listeners become supporters for as little as $1 a month. So no, you don't have to record ads like this, but if you want to, Anchor can hook you up. Learn more at anchor.fm or get started by downloading the app. As a book lover and author of an actual book, bookstores have always been my happy place and my sanctuary ever since I was a little kid, and I personally never have trouble finding a book to read. Usually I have the opposite problem, and my many bookshelves in my apartment and my overflowing nightstand is evidence of that. But if you're somebody who wishes that they could read more, but you just can't ever seem to find a book that interests you, I thought that I would try to be encouraging by asking just how many books in the world are there? It certainly seems as though there is an infinite number to me. I find it alarming and somewhat distressing that I will never live long enough to read even a small fraction of all of the books that have ever been published, let alone all of the new ones that get added every year. To get a sense of just how long books have been getting published, recall that the printing press, invented by Johannes Gutenberg, has been around since 1440, so several centuries. Of course, in the early years of book publishing, when the pressing wasn't automated but rather done by hand, there weren't so many books coming out every year. Accounting for the various tribulations one might have come up against in 15th century book publishing, there's also the matter of definition. What do we mean when we say book? What counts toward our quest of asking, if you'd like a book to read, how many do you possibly have to choose from? Are we only talking about novels? Are we including nonfiction and poetry, reference? I mean, personally, I loved encyclopedias as a kid. I probably chose to read reference books more regularly than, like, storybooks. And are we counting up basically any bound volume, which then could also potentially include something like a PhD dissertation? Now, we could say that it has to have an ISBN, the International Standard Book Number, but that would discount all of the books published prior to the 1960s when ISBNs were developed. Aside from that, even today they haven't become universal, so you would also be missing out on non-Western books and, of course, several centuries worth of literary classics. It would be virtually impossible to count every book by hand, and in fact, many books which we have record of existing may not actually physically exist today, as I'm sure any rare bookseller will tell you. But back in 2010, Google decided to make use of the technical advantages we have in terms of cataloging the world and history's literature by cross-referencing billions of records, which was necessary to make sure that they didn't count things multiple times, which would be easy to do because books can be totally repackaged every time they're printed, even if they don't necessarily include new information. And then they tried to basically develop an algorithm that could spit out the best approximation of just how many books there are in the world today. Now, they did produce a number, but there are several caveats. The first of which is that now it's nearly a decade later, so you have to figure that the number today would be even higher, and perhaps even a lot higher because of the recent self-publishing boom. In fact, from 2011 to 2013, there were at least 1 million new titles assigned an ISBN. And there are places to track this, but basically a facet of US trade statistics. We produce around 40% of the world's print material. So in 2010, Google approximated that there were just shy of 130 million books in the world. 1,029,864,888 to be, well, nowhere near exact, but approximate. Now, according to World Book data from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, in 2010 there were 328,259 new titles published in the United States, 206,000 in the UK, and 189,295 in China. Now, at the other end of that spectrum, Sweden only published 4,074 new titles in 2010, and Mexico had 9,075. Both of those countries had higher overall printing numbers because there were a lot of reprints. And then there were other countries, many actually, that hadn't submitted any new data since like the mid-90s. For example, the last time that Libya reported in 1994, they had only published 26 new books. Now, this task was all in service to Google's larger goal of organizing and digitalizing hella books, like all the books. And to that end, as engineer Leonid Tachin explained in a blog post, to get that tally, they had to basically consider different editions of the same work separately, like, for example, the many editions of Shakespeare's plays, which often are reprinted but include new additional content like notes and forewords and commentary, making it worthwhile to distinguish them as separate texts for the reader. Now, working with their definition and parameters, Google used the metadata to all the records from around the world in terms of how books are cataloged. That certainly extends beyond the ISBN, as mentioned, but the principle is more or less the same. There were some 150 providers of this info for Google's algorithm to pull from. Still, it took a long time to whittle down from things like publisher and title and serial and basically all of the other things in order to result in this imperfect and non-static statistic. But the point being here is that there are so many books out there, so many books, and so you're bound to find one that interests you.